What's up, y'all? Bill Cammack here. The other day in a video chat, Max Kessler asked me to describe what I do with my 2-bus processing, so that's what we're going to talk about today. The way you'd actually do this is by how things sound, but in this case I'm going to use a sine wave so you can see a steady signal. So signal is going to arrive at some volume level at your 2-bus. I'm representing that with the test oscillator, using a sine wave that's registering -18 dBFS, which is 18 decibels below full scale being 0. 0 being the top of this. So if I turn everything off, and then I unmute the channel, you get -18. Again, I wouldn't actually do this if I were setting up a 2-bus, but I wanted to show you where the volume started and how it changes. So this output number and this input number match up. And that's all a sine wave does, it just stays constant, so it's not like actual music, which is going to have higher and lower volume content. So in this case, I selected -18 dB because that's what my volume meter is calibrated to. Klanghelm VUMT, -18. Activate this with both of these at 0, left and right. This is registering 0 for -18. And like I said, since it's a sine wave, it stays steady, it doesn't actually bounce. So if I raise or lower the input level, these needles move. Of course, I could do it the other way. I could have my input here, and then I could use VUMT, link it, and bring it back up to where I want it. Or I could change it over to mid-side. In this case, it's a sine wave, which is mono, so the mid has 0, side has nothing. So right now, the test oscillator is representing how loud my mix actually is when it gets to the 2-bus. What VUMT does for me here is it lets me decide how loud I want the actual mix to hit the processing. So the first thing I'm going to have is console emulation, which is emulating the so-called sound of the desk. For that, I'll probably use Slate Digital Virtual Mix Bus, and I'll probably use it on Trident because to me that's where I get the cleanest high end. So we have more needles here. Turn it on, 0. So you got -18, 0, and 0. However, you start getting different effects as you get into the red over here. The board starts going into saturation and then eventually distortion, which makes your entire song sound different. This is one of the reasons why I set up my 2-bus early on in the process and not after the fact. I'd rather mix into that difference than add it later on and guess at what might happen. So right now, with all 3 of these basically at 0, if I unmute this, this is still at -18. So now what I want to do, if I want to get the sound of the desk, I'm going to push this desk. So if my mix is actually coming in at -18, I'm going to use VUMT to push the desk because there's no input here. So we're going to use this dial to drive it. Actually, we can click here and get our numbers. So now we have both these sets of needles pinned to the right. Again, you would do this actually by how things sound, but I'm just showing you the theory. So with these 2 pinned, they're actually louder than you want to hit the rest of the chain with. So I have another VUMT right behind the 2 of those. When I turn this on, this is pinned also. Also, you notice on the way in, this is minus 8.8. On the way out, it's minus 8.6. That's no big deal, just wanted to point that out. So now what I'm going to do with the second VUMT is the reverse of what I did with the first one to get us back where we want to be, which is 0. So it's in stereo mode and it's linked. I'm just going to bring it back down. So now you're starting at a minus 18. You're boosting here. This is getting the same boost. This is bringing the boost back down. Then if I turn this off and hit this button, we're at minus 18, or according to this, minus 17.9, but minus 18, which is right where we started. Again, the reason you want to do that is you want to hit the desk harder than you're hitting the rest of your 2-bus chain. It's really two different processes that happen to be in the same line. So now that you're back down, you can turn on your 2-bus compression. I've already set this up the way I would normally start out, which is slow attack, fast release, threshold all the way down. Ratio is 1.5 to 1. May or may not use auto release. Drive up, makeup gain up. High pass filter will depend on the sound. It might be somewhere around 75 hertz, it might be 90, it might be all the way off. But I'll start out with it off. So you turn this on. You have your meter selection, which is the input, the output, which the input is lower than the output because of our makeup gain. We've added 8 dB there. Once again, this would be done by sound. This wouldn't necessarily be where it stays, but the metering we're going to use is in the middle, which is gain reduction. And I'd probably start out trying to get around minus 2 dB of gain reduction. So I can come back to VUMT and move this until I get that. So depending on what you're using, makeup gain can just increase the volume, or it can add more of the sound of the unit to the song. Let's say that this much makeup gain got me the sound I wanted. Next up is going to be metric halo channel strip, which I'm using really just as an EQ. Because I already did compression with the FG Red. This would basically be for global EQ if I just wanted to add something towards the end of the process to affect the whole song. So turning this on, you see everything's redlining. So what you're going to do here is decrease the input gain. So then you can use your EQ from here. Or from here. And set up whatever you wanted it to do to get the final sound you were looking for. From there I would go into tape emulation. So then I have a couple of options here. I can change the input volume here. I could change the output volume here. I could change the input volume here. I'll just go with this output volume. We'll watch this meter. So then you would set up the input on this depending on how hard you want to hit the tape. You have your EQ and your tape types and all this over here. You set this up the way you want to hear it. And then the last part of the process is the limiter, which I'm using Vlad G's limiter number 6. The basic point being that since I don't utilize mastering, I'm going to output my track at minus 0.5 dBFS as the highest peak, and I'm going to print it. So I'll mute this in the video so it's not excessively loud, but this is where it's actually going to end up. And there are lots of ways I could have done that. I could have put in another VUMT in between the tape and the limiter for volume control. I could have not turned this all the way up. I could have just used VUMT for that. I could have not used the compressor. I could have not used the peak limiter. I could have used the clipper. There are a bunch of different ways that you can do this, and you would choose one of them based on the sound of your song. That's why it's good to have options. And what you end up with is, like I said, minus 0.5 dB as your peak. Again, this is a sine wave, so it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays at the same level. This would just be the highest point of your song. It can't get any louder than this because the limiter is locking it down. So to recap, we're starting out with our signal that's coming in from the song. We're deciding how loud we want the peaks of that song to hit the console. Bring it back down for the rest of the chain, or in this case, not bring it back down in order to hit the red the way I want it to for the gain reduction. But normally what's going to happen is this is going to be going so loud through this that you're going to want to bring it back down to get into this. So you go through your compression, go into your EQ, go into your tape, go into your limiter, minus 0.5, print it. If you got any questions, ask them on Facebook or YouTube. Bill Cammack, I'm out.